Hi guys, so here we are with Mark Batterson, chapter 11, and it's called Grab Your Ox Goad. The verse, Judges 3:31, after Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel. In 1963, MIT meteorologist Edward Lorenz presented a hypothesis to the New York Academy of Science. Lorenz theorized that a minor event like the flapping of a butterfly's wing in Brazil could conceivably alter wind currents sufficiently to cause a tornado in Texas. His theory grew wings in the academic community and became known to the general public as the butterfly effect. The genesis of the theory was a prototype computer program that Lorenz designed to simulate and forecast weather systems. On the day of his accidental discovery, Lorenz had to hurry out of his office for a meeting. Instead of entering 0.506127, the number he had used in earlier trials, he rounded to the nearest thousandth, 0.506. Lorenz figured that a change of 1/1000th of 1% would be inconsequential. He figured wrong. When he returned to the lab later that day, he found a radical difference in simulated weather conditions. According to Lorenz, the numerical difference between the original number and the rounded number was the equivalent of a puff of wind, but the net difference was the equivalent of a catastrophic weather event. Lorenz came to a simple yet profound conclusion. Minuscule changes in input can make macroscopic differences in output. It's true in science, it's true in life. And that simple discovery has the power to change your life. It can radically alter your spiritual, emotional, relational, or financial forecast. It can change the atmosphere of your organization or your marriage. One decision, one change, one risk, one idea. That's all it takes. You don't have to make 100 changes. All that does is divide your energy by 100ths and result in a 1% chance of success. You have to be 100% committed to one change. It will take an all-out effort, and it will probably be the hardest thing you've ever done. But that one change has the potential to make a 100% difference in your life. One risk. One sentence. After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. That is all the press Shamgar gets in Scripture. But this one byline tells me everything I need to know about him. One daring decision and one farm implement results in a difference for the entire nation of Israel. This one risk turned 15 minutes of fame into a model of courage that still inspires 3 millennia later. Israel was in a state of spiritual anarchy and political tyranny. They did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, and the punishment was enslavement to the Philistines, who ruled by fear and intimidation. But one man refused to be ruled by unrighteousness. He decided to disrupt the status quo, and he did it with an ox goad. Next to David, Shamgar has to rank as one of history's most improbable heroes. And just like the shepherd turned king, this farmer turned warrior transformed a tool of his trade into a weapon of war. I don't think David had any idea when he was tending sheep that God would use his skill with a slingshot to catapult him into a national limelight. And I don't think Shamgar had a clue while he was driving oxen that God would turn his ox goad into the instrument of Israel's deliverance. Shamgar had no army, no alliance, and no artillery. All he had was an ox goad, a long stick used by a farmer to prod his animals. And he did not let what he could not do keep him from doing what he could. After all, God plus one equals a majority. And if God is for you, who can be against you? So Shamgar grabbed his ox goad and charged the enemy's armies. It looked as foolhardy as David charging Goliath with a slingshot. The enemy chuckled at his makeshift weaponry until he started wielding it. Then the look in his eyes struck fear in their hearts. Courage doesn't wait until situational factors turn in one's favor. It doesn't wait until a plan is perfectly formed. It doesn't wait until the tide of popular opinion is turned. Courage only waits for one thing, a green light from God. And when God gives the go, it's full steam ahead, no questions asked. A little crazy. Like Shamgar, Corey Whitman grew up on a farm. And while you can take a farmer's daughter out of the farm, you can't take the farm out of a farmer's daughter. After college, Corey moved to Washington, D.C. and started working on Capitol Hill. She got involved at National Community Church and led one of the most unique small groups in our history as a church. We have a free market system in which we let leaders get a vision from God and go for it. Our groups reflect the God-ordained passions of our people, and so Corey decided to launch a group for women on agricultural policy. I honestly didn't think a single soul would show up to such a narrowed focus group, but more than a dozen women ended up joining the group, and that was just the beginning. Corey went on our first mission trip to Thailand to work with The Well, a ministry that rescues women out of the sex industry. During that trip, Corey prayed a dangerous prayer. Lord, break my heart for the things that break your heart. Our conversation with a Thai farm girl who ended up in Bangkok's red light district became, because of the circumstances beyond her control, did just that. Corey came back to the United States, but she left her heart in Thailand. She decided to quit her job and move to Thailand as a full-time missionary. She started out working during the night shift in the red light district of Bangkok, ministering to women trapped in the web of sex trade. She is now trying to stop the problem before it starts by piloting a program for teens in rural Thailand. This single 20-something is mentoring and mothering 17 girls. Corey shared some of her doubts and dreams in a blog post titled, "A Little Crazy Goes a Long Way." It says, "Can I really be an adequate interim parent for teenagers abandoned by their mom until God provides more permanent foster parents? Will God heal a faithful and faith-filled couple that just discovered they are HIV positive and protect their unborn baby from the disease? Will my friend reach his goal by staying clean from meth for an entire year and grow as a committed husband and father? Will God build a movement to create real change in rural communities to stop this cycle of family and community brokenness that so often leads to participation in sex industry?" I love Corey's answer to her own questions. Quote, "I'm beginning to realize a little crazy goes a long way when you're talking kingdom crazy. Some of my questions won't be answered for months or years, but I am standing on God's promise that He is able to do immeasurably more than all that we can ask or imagine. Sometimes my faith falters and feelings of inadequacy, loneliness, and smallness cloud my vision, and I get overwhelmed at the task at hand. But when I put my faith glasses on, all things are possible." Corey wasn't looking for excuses. If she was, she would have found plenty of reasons not to do what she's done. Corey was looking for opportunities, and opportunities typically become disguised as impossible problems. And while most people run away from their problems, Shamgars run at them with their ox goads. Thailand is a non-confrontational culture, which makes change very challenging. But Corey is gracefully challenging the status quo. She is fighting governmental corruption, sex solicitation, and illiteracy with her ox goad. She's also helping harvest this year's rice crop with her adopted teenage daughters, using the same exhortation her parents used with her when she was a teenager. It's building character. That's what going all out for Christ is all about. It's attacking problems with whatever ox goad God has given you. It's an all-out assault on the forces of darkness by being salt and light. It's more than pointing out problems. It's committing yourself to be a part of the solution. It's more than just having a heart for Christ. It's being His hands and feet. Here I am. In God's kingdom, calling trumps credentials every time. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. And the litmus test isn't experience or expertise. It's availability and teachability. If you are willing to go when God gives you a green light, He will take you to inaccessible places to do impossible things. That's how a farmer's daughter ended up in rural Thailand. She was willing, and sometimes it's as simple as that. And the quote, "Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, 'Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?' And I said, 'Here I am, send me.'" Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Samuel, David, Isaiah. They all have one thing in common. They all said, "Here I am." Isn't it ironic that we spend so much time and energy trying to figure out how to get where God wants us to go, when all we have to do is simply say, "Here I am"? It's God's job to get us where He wants us to go. Our job is to make ourselves available anytime, any place. Like a doctor on call or a police officer on duty or a firefighter on shift. It's our readiness to respond that God's looking for. Sometimes it's a simple prompting to go out of our way to love our next door neighbor. Sometimes it's calling to move halfway around the world. But it starts, or always starts, with a little 3-word prayer of availability. Here am I. That's what Samuel said when he heard the still small voice of the Holy Spirit. That's what Moses said at the burning bush. That's what Caleb said when he finally stepped foot into the promised land. That's what Isaiah said when King Uzziah died. That's what Corey said after her trip to Thailand. Corey was willing to go from expert to expatriate. She left an established career on Capitol Hill to jump into what she calls the sea of foolishness. She left her friends and family to learn a new language, a new culture. But because she looked through faith glasses, she now gets to see God change people in crazy ways every day. Are you willing to do something a little crazy? Shamgar may have been the least qualified person to deliver Israel. For starters, he likely wasn't even an Israelite. His name is Haran in origin. He could have rationalized inaction in a dozen different ways. I don't have the right weapon. I can't do this by myself. These aren't even my people. If we look for an excuse, we'll always find one. If we don't, we won't. When it comes to making excuses, we are infinitely creative. What if we channeled that creativity into finding solutions instead of finding excuses? If we did, we'd be an instrument of deliverance just like Shamgar, just like Corey. When God stirs our hearts or breaks our hearts, we cannot sit back. We've got to step up and step in. We've got to go all in by going all out. But if we have the courage to make the choice or take the risk, it will become the defining moment of our lives. Redefining success. You never know what relationship, skill, experience, or attribute God will use to bring about his eternal purpose. He used a beauty pageant to strategically position Esther as queen of Persia and stop the genocide of the Jews. He used Nehemiah's diligence as a cupbearer to position him for a royal favor that would parlay into rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. He used David's musical chops to open the palace door and give him access to the king of Israel. He used Joseph's imprisonment and his ability to interpret dreams to save 2 nations from famine. And he used the zeal of a mass murderer named Saul to spread the gospel via 3 missionary journeys while writing half of the New Testament in the process. If God used them, he can use you, and he wants to. In fact, he is cultivating talents within you that will serve kingdom purposes in ways that you are totally unaware of right now. It may be your God-given athletic abilities or a musical proclivity that God uses to give you a platform to give him praise. It may be your creative genius. It may be an idiosyncrasy. Or it could just be your good old-fashioned work ethic. No matter what it is, it's a gift from God, and that is to be used for God. Do the best you can with what you have where you are. That's my definition of success. It's not based on circumstances. It's not based on wealth or power or platform. And it's not based on past experience or future potential. It's stewarding every opportunity in every way, every day. Every second of time, every ounce of talent, every penny of money. Success is spelled stewardship. And stewardship is spelled success. In terms of economic status and occupational hierarchy, some might see Corey's transition from Capitol Hill to a rural farm in Thailand as a demotion. In my book, she's a modern-day Shamgar. She is using her ox goad to save teenage girls who are as enslaved as the Israelites were 3 millennia ago. It doesn't matter whether you're a journalist, teacher, entrepreneur, artist, politician, or lawyer. What matters is that you are using your ox goad for God's purposes. Don't just make a living, make a life. Mark a mark. Make a difference. You don't need to change jobs. You don't need to change circumstances. You don't need to change friends or change spouses. You need to change you. Enough is enough. I'm not sure what went through Shamgar's mind when he picked up his ox goad and picked a fight with the enemy, but I think he made a decision that if he was going to go down, he was going to go down fighting, and that's the key to deliverance. Whether it's from the Philistines or pride or prejudice or pornography, you've got to go on the offensive. You've got to pick a fight. You've got to plan a D-Day invasion. There comes a point when enough is enough. We know we cannot continue down the path we are on because it's dead-end relationally, physically or spiritually. It may not kill us, but it will eat us alive. We know we cannot keep doing what we've always done. Not if we want to get into shape or get out of debt. Not if we want to recapture the romance or reach the goal. Not if we want to leave a legacy worth living up to. The good news is this: you are only one decision away from a totally different life. One risk can revolutionize your life. One change can change everything. If you can start small and stay consistent, anything is possible. A 1% change, given enough time, can make a 99% difference in your life. But you cannot leave change to chance. You've got to grab your ox goad and go for it. Cut up your credit card, register for the marathon, apply for the graduate program, take the mission trip, set up the counseling appointment. The Plains of Hesitation. Using the pseudonym William A. Lawrence, George W. Cecil said, "On the plains of hesitation bleached the bones of countless millions who, at the dawn of victory, sat down to wait, and waiting, died." I'm both a procrastinator and a perfectionist. Plus, I'm a possibility thinker. That combination of personality traits means I've had to discipline myself to make decisions and set deadlines. I've come to terms with the fact that indecision is a decision. As I said earlier, I share my life goal list in the Circle Maker, along with 10 steps to setting goals. One of the keys is setting deadlines. Dreams without deadlines are dead in the water. Deadlines are really lifelines to achieving our goals. When it comes to going after our goals, the greatest adversary is inertia. The first step is always the longest and the hardest. We have a tendency to keep doing what we've always done. Unless we commit to a new course of action, we'll maintain our current rhythms and routines. It's also known as status quo bias. Status quo bias. In 1965, a study was done on the campus of Yale University. Graduating seniors were educated about the dangers of tetanus and given the opportunity to get a free inoculation at the health center. While a majority of the students were convinced they needed to get the shot, only 3% followed through and got the vaccine. Another group of students was given the same lecture, but was also given a copy of the campus map with the location of the health center circled on it. They were then asked to look at their weekly schedules and figure out when they would find the time to get the shot. More than 9 times as many students got inoculated. Good intentions aren't good enough. You need to make the call or make the move. You need to set the deadline or set the appointment. If you don't, your bones will probably bleach on the plains of hesitation. If Shamgar had focused on the fact that he was going to go up against 600 Philistines, I bet he would have given up before he even got started. The enemy often tries to discourage us by overwhelming us. We need to counterpunch by breaking down our goals into smaller steps. I don't know if you can overcome alcoholism or anorexia for the rest of your life, but I believe you can win the battle today. Don't worry about next week or next year. Live in day-tight compartments. Can you resist temptation for 24 hours? Can you win the battle for one day? I know you can. So do you. And so does the enemy. Take it one day at a time. One step at a time. A few years ago, I climbed Half Dome at Yosemite, National Park. Yosemite National Park, there we go. I remember looking up at the summit and thinking, how am I going to make it to the top? Well, the answer was really quite simple, one step at a time. If we keep putting one foot in front of the other, it's amazing how far we can go. The hardest part of the hike wasn't physical, it was mental. The last leg was a 60-degree slope to the summit that looked like a 90-degree climb to someone who was afraid of heights. I'm afraid of heights. And when I finally got to the top of Half Dome, I sat down on a large rock and noticed that someone had etched something into the rock. If you can do this, you can do anything. Something inside of me clicked because I knew it was true. I decided to attempt something I hadn't been able to do in 5 years of trying. I was packing 225 pounds, which isn't terribly overweight on my 6'3" frame. But I knew I'd feel better and live longer if I could tip the scales at sub 200. I made a defining decision to do it, and then I made a daily decision to exercise more and eat less. In 2 months, I dropped 25 pounds. I also dropped my cholesterol by 50 points, and I felt 5 years younger. We spend far too much energy focusing on the very thing we can control. We spend far too much energy focusing on the thing we cannot control. the outcome. What if I fall back into my bad habits? What if my romantic efforts aren't reciprocated? What if I don't hit my target weight or get my dream job? Don't worry about the results. If it's the right thing, the results are God's responsibility. Focusing on doing the right thing for the right reason, and don't buy into the lie that it can't be done. It will take an all-out effort, but you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. A failed attempt is not failing. Failing is not trying. If you are trying, you are succeeding. That's what going all out is all about. It's giving it everything you've got. So grab your ox goad and go for it. And that is the end of chapter 11. Thanks, guys.